I'm Angela.
And I'm Paige.
Join us as we dive into our obsession with true crime, history, and mysterious stories. We'll explore the intricate details of the corrupt, the cruel, and the calculating.
We assume no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this episode. The Corrupt Podcast is based on the facts and our opinions of the case. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Corrupt Podcast.
The bodies of Ed and Minnie Maurin were discovered on a logging road on Christmas Eve 1985. The elderly couple had been missing for days, and their deaths would shock the community, beginning a decades-long investigation into their murders.
Welcome to our 5 days of corrupted Christmas. For Christmas, one of the best gifts you could give us is to leave a review on any one or all of our platforms. Spotify, Apple, and Facebook all have review options. We're incredibly thankful for every listen, and the recommendations really help to get our podcast out there.
You can also support this podcast by joining our Corrupt crew over at patreon.com/corruptpodcast. Early access to episodes, a free gift, behind the scenes, and exclusive content is all happening over there. You can also make a one-time contribution to our Corrupted Fund with our PayPal. Both links are in the episode notes.
Wilhelmina Mary Minnie Kurps was born on Christmas Day, 1901. In 1923, Minnie married George Louis Hadeler. They had 4 children together. Joseph was born in 1925 and lived only 5 days. Delbert was born in 1926, Dennis in 1927, and Hazel in 1930.
Louis died on November 28, 1958, and 3 years later, Minnie would marry Ed Maurin. It was no secret that Ed and Minnie were well off, but they were very private about their finances. The couple owned a 120-acre property, raised beef, and leased their land for a Christmas tree growing farm.
On December 19, 1985, friends arrived at the house for a monthly church luncheon. The church group took turns hosting the event, and this time it would be hosted by Minnie at her home. It was an extra fun luncheon because the husbands were invited this time for Christmas. When the friends arrived around noon, 83-year-old Minnie and 81-year-old Ed weren't home.
One of the church friends called Minnie's daughter-in-law Shirley. The family went to the house, they broke a window and crawled through to gain access to the home. What they found was terrifying. There was a footprint on top of the furnace, and a window on the rear of the home had also been broken. Ed's pickup truck was parked out back, but there was no sign of Ed, Minnie, or their 1969 Chrysler Newport. Breakfast had been made and the dishes were done. But instead of just 2 sets of dishes, there were 3 plates and 3 cups in the dishwasher. A box of bank statements was on the bathroom floor in between the bathtub and the sink, and more bank statements were sitting out beside of the telephone. Minnie's purse was also still in the home, sitting behind her chair and covered with a newspaper.
As soon as Minnie's daughter Hazel saw the home, she knew something was very wrong. Minnie and Ed would have never left their bank statements sitting out. Hazel jumped into action by calling friends in the hospital to confirm if anyone had seen them. One of those phone calls was to her brother Dennis and his son Michael. Dennis and Michael had driven by the house that morning on their way to work around 5:30 a.m. They noticed that the bedroom light was on and thought it was odd since Ed and Minnie usually don't get up that early. They assumed Ed was up to use the bathroom and didn't think much of it. The family contacted the sheriff department, and just after 6 p.m., the sheriff department arrived at the house.
The following day, an employee of the Yardbirds Mall reported that a vehicle matching the Maurins' Chrysler description was parked at the northwest section of the parking lot. A police officer arrived. Attempting to not touch the frosted-over vehicle, he breathed on the frozen glass just enough to see into the car. And what he saw confirmed everyone's worst fears. The front seat was empty, but the car interior was covered in blood. The keys were in the ignition, and the battery was dead. There were cigarette butts in the ashtray, which was significant because neither of the Maurins smoked. The windshield was cracked, and the vehicle dash had shotgun pellet damage. There was a red blanket across the driver's seat, and once moved, showed a large amount of blood had soaked into the seat. Law enforcement used the keys to open the trunk, but it was empty.
That afternoon, law enforcement marked the Maurins' home as a crime scene and investigated it. They noticed that the blinds were down, which was unusual, especially when the Christmas tree was up, because Minnie liked to show it off through the front window. Minnie's purse being hidden behind the couch was also unusual. Outside of the house, a fireplace cleanout had more bank statements in it. Fingerprints were found in the home, but they came back as Ed, Minnie, or other family members.
Detectives discovered that Ed had contacted the Sterling Savings Bank and withdrawn quite a bit of money. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Ed. The teller at Sterling Savings Bank had received a call from Ed at approximately 10 a.m. Ed had requested to withdraw $8,500 cash, and the bank had arranged for him to come in an hour later so the money would be ready. $8,500 in 1985 is the equivalent of $25,000 today. So this was such a large sum of money that the bank needed extra time to wrangle it up. The cash was significant for the Maurins. An $8,500 withdrawal left only $3,500 in their bank account. To explain this large withdrawal, Ed told the teller that he was buying a car for one of the kids.
The last time Ed was seen was when he parked the car and went into the bank to withdraw the money. Nothing seemed strange. He took the cash requested in $100 bills and left the bank. When detectives followed up on the $8,500 withdrawal, the kids were confused. None of them knew anything about a car purchase.
Then on Christmas Eve 1985, and a day before what should have been Minnie's 84th birthday, their bodies were found in a wooded area. A witness called 911 after they drove by what was initially thought as a mannequin in a ditch, but they realized it wasn't a mannequin, but the body of a woman. Pretty quickly, it was determined that the woman's body was Minnie Maurin, and although the caller reported her being in a ditch, the crime scene photo shows her body lying in between two rural logging roads. Detectives followed a blood trail from where the pavement ended on one of the logging roads. From the pavement, the trail went 29 feet to a pool of blood. False teeth, glasses, and a comb were also found along the trail. They followed the path and found Ed's body.
A blood-soaked bank receipt was found in Ed's pocket, confirming that even though Ed had withdrawn $8,500, he only had $35 in his wallet. The couple were transported to the Lewis County morgue, where it would be determined that both had died instantly from gunshot wounds. Dennis had to identify his mother and stepfather. Police determined that Ed and Minnie had been shot in their car with a shotgun. Then their bodies were dragged from the car to the wooded area before the vehicle was left in the Yardbirds parking lot.
Thousands of tips were reported to the sheriff department. Bob Lyons, a family friend, drove by Ed and Minnie's home around 8 a.m. on December 19th, and he saw a white car in their driveway. Another witness also saw a white van parked in front of Ed and Minnie's home. Several people had witnessed a man leaving Yardbirds parking lot wearing a green army coat, blue jeans, carrying an item that looked like a gun wrapped in a towel, and wearing a stocking cap. The man had brown hair, with possible facial hair. A composite sketch was made of the potential suspect.
Starting with the fact that only the family's fingerprints were found, detectives investigated the family. The composite sketch also had strong similarities with Ed and Minnie's 20-year-old grandson, Michael. Michael had been into some minor shenanigans over the years, like taking money out of Dennis's safe. He was interrogated and agreed to take a polygraph test, which Michael passed. The rest of the family was eliminated one by interrogations and polygraphs as well.
One of the anonymous tips made to the sheriff department was about brothers Rick and John Gregory Greg Rife. The tip said that Rick Rife had done something he shouldn't have. When the police questioned Rick's wife Robin about the tip, she told the sheriff department that Rick had wanted her to have sex with a dog. The tip was written off and the investigation moved on. But Rick and Greg were always in the police and the community's sight.
The brothers were drug dealers who lived in the area in the 1980s. They were known as the bad guys who would threaten to hurt or kill anyone who stood in their way. In 1981, Rick was convicted of a felony and legally was prohibited from having access to guns. 2 years after the murders, Greg and Rick moved to Alaska, but this wouldn't stop detectives from continuing to try and connect them to Ed and Minnie's murders. In 1992, the police started over with the investigation, looking at all evidence and tips from the beginning. The detectives followed up on another tip that was connected to Rick and Greg, a tip to talk to Robin Rife again.
Detectives tracked down Robin Rife, the now ex-wife of Rick, who was serving time at an Arizona prison for a drug charge in 1992. When the detectives called to speak about a murder case from Lewis County, Robin immediately responded,
"You mean the one where the 2 old people were killed?"
Robin said that she had dropped Rick and Greg off about a mile from Ed and Minnie's house on December 19, 1985. Then the next morning, Greg had called Robin and asked her to come pick them up at the location where the bodies were found. Rick was mad, telling Greg to get her away from the bodies, but Robin had seen what the brothers had done.
Fearing that Robin could be portrayed as out for revenge on her ex-husband, the prosecutor didn't think Robin's testimony was enough to arrest Rick and Greg, so the investigation continued. Robin would eventually be transferred to a Washington prison for the remainder of her sentence to help investigators with their case against Rick and Greg. Detectives continued to follow up with her every 6 months.
Shortly after Ed and Minnie's murder, a reward fund was started at the Sterling Savings Bank for anyone with information. With no updates over several years, Dennis had the bank return the money to the people who had donated it. In the 1990s, detectives also traveled to Alaska to speak with Rick and Greg. When asked about his involvement in Ed and Minnie's deaths, Rick gave short answers. Greg originally said he wasn't involved, then said he didn't know, and followed it with, he just needed time to think. Greg started to cry and wouldn't cooperate further in the interview. Polygraph tests were given to both brothers, and unsurprisingly, both failed.
The case went cold again after Robin died in 1995. Their key witness was now deceased and wouldn't be able to make a statement in court, so the case was put on hold pending new evidence. Dennis had made a vow.
At their funeral, I laid my hand on their casket and I said, I will find out who did this.
He kept his vow, and in 2005, Dennis hired 2 private investigators to work alongside the sheriff's office. The same year, Lewis County Sheriff Detective Bruce Kimsey was assigned to the case. The information provided to Detective Kimsey was massive, over 1,000 pages of notes between 20 different books that were each 4 inches thick.
Can you even imagine the workload that was laid down in front of Detective Kimsey with this? 1,000 pages of just notes that you have to assemble and try and make heads and tails of from 1985.
I mean, you would do wonderful at that. Someone like me, I would not. I would not do. You read a lot, so you would be prepared. I'd be like, where the F do I start?
We're starting in 2002 today.
I'll be like, just let me highlight stuff. Just tell me what to highlight.
Oh my gosh.
You'll be like, yeah, we need to save that there. Highlight that.
Taxpayer dollars makes copies of 1,000 pages so you can highlight it.
I have special highlighters. Just saying.
Yeah, it better be the kind that doesn't bleed through.
Right. I love those. Those are the kind to get.
The original investigation had a photo lineup in black and white pictures. Detective Kimsey used the same photos, but in larger color prints this time. Every man in the lineup looked similar, dark shaggy hair and dark eyes. The photos were shown to witnesses who had seen the man walking down the street over 2 decades previously. Several of the witnesses identified one of the Rife brothers, and the common description was that the man had stuck with them all those years because of his intense and piercing eyes.
Detectives found Robin's sister, and she told them about Christmas 1985. Rick, Robin, and the 3 children were very poor, living in a trailer with hand-me-down clothes. At the time, Rick didn't have a job, and Robin worked sometimes as a waitress. That Christmas Day in 1985, Rick, Robin, and the kids were in brand new clothes, Rick was wearing a green army jacket. They brought presents for everyone and gave Robin's sister and her husband, Larry, $300 of cocaine for Christmas. Who gives cocaine for Christmas?
It's 1985. Also, they're drug dealers.
What year it is.
It was probably the most common sense gift for them to give.
I mean, I guess.
That's probably what they were dealing was coke.
I guess so. I mean, whatever floats your boat. Rick also asked Larry suspiciously if there was a way to trace shotgun pellets. The following spring, Robin and the kids took a trip to Disneyland, something they should have never been able to afford.
Rick also had access to a gun that wasn't his. On October 3rd, 1984, Rick's friend Les George purchased a shotgun for protection while working as a long-haul semi-truck driver. Les gave the gun to Rick to cut down, but Les couldn't get the gun back until the spring of 1986.
And when you say cut down, you mean he intentionally wanted the gun shorter, and Rick was going to do that for him?
Yeah, so Rick literally sawed the shotgun barrel down. Les wanted the shotgun barrel to be shorter because he was driving in that semi, and I think the gun was too big for the cabin. So he wanted something more maneuverable. He wanted a shorter gun.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
But he wouldn't get that gun back for almost 2 years because he gave it to Rick in October of 84 and he didn't get it back to the spring of 86.
Yeah.
When Les did get his gun back, it was after the murders, and Les felt that the gun had to be involved. He wasn't the only one who thought the sawed-off shotgun was involved. Les had put the gun in his parents' closet, where his mom found it. She asked Les's dad to get rid of the gun, so he threw it off the side of the Mayfield Lake Bridge. The gun has never been recovered. Just unpack that for a second. You have a friend of Rick that loans his gun to Rick, giving Rick access to a shotgun. Then after he gets it back in the spring, he hides it at his parents' house thinking that something is not right with it. Like, he doesn't get rid of it. He hides it at his parents' house. Can you imagine how mad you would be if your adult son is hiding a sawed-off shotgun in your closet, and then you open up the closet one day and you're like, oh, that's probably the gun.
Yeah, I also wonder what the dialogue was between Rick and Les. Like, was there something that Rick said that, like, alarmed Les when he was, returning his gun back to him, and it just made him feel off?
Nobody did the right thing there. Les did not do the right thing. His parents did not do the right thing. Like, that is just a whole hot mess express.
Mm-hmm.
If you are suspecting it, take it to the sheriff's department and let them decide.
Yeah, did his parents know that he owned a gun?
His mom says that she thought it was involved in the murders.
Oh, okay.
So she asked Les's dad to get rid of it.
Yeah, totally the wrong thing then.
Absolutely the wrong thing to do. This could have been solved back in 86.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In 2011, Detective Kimsey presented the case to the prosecutor, and this time, even with only circumstantial evidence, the charges against Rick and Greg Reif would finally proceed and arrest warrants were signed on July 8, 2012. In July 2012, the Lewis County Sheriff Office traveled to King Salmon.
Isn't that the most awesome name for a city?
It is the most awesome name.
That's got to be like the most epic name for a city that we've had in this podcast. And we finally hit it in December.
I know.
King Salmon, Alaska.
I know. I knew it was coming. I just can't contain myself. King Salmon.
I heard somebody pronounce it King Salmon. I'm like, I don't think that's how that goes.
If it's in Alaska, it's salmon. You darn well know it is.
King Salmon, Alaska.
I'm going to call salmon Salmon from now on. Get me a salmon at Red Lobster.
You can. They're going to look at you funny.
Yep. So the sheriff's office traveled to King Salmon, Alaska to arrest Rick Reif for the murders of Ed and Minnie Maurin. Rick was now 53 years old and in poor health. Just 1 week earlier, Greg had died from natural causes, and justice would never be served.
When law enforcement arrived at Rick's house, he wouldn't respond or open the door. Rick was obviously home, and he did eventually let them into the house, but he denied any involvement with the murders. With his arrest for the double homicide, Rick simply said, "Well, I'm going to need my medications," and went with the detectives.
We're going to need our medications too, Rick. Rick's arrest and Greg's death opened the floodgates for more tips. Turns out multiple people had been threatened into silence by the Rife brothers. One of these tips was from Jason Shriver. On December 19th, 1985, Jason was on the way to get his wisdom teeth taken out when he and his mother passed Ed and Minnie in their car. Jason saw that Ed was driving, Minnie was in the driver's side back seat, Rick was sitting in the front passenger side, and Greg was in the passenger side back seat.
Jason waved to Ed and Minnie, but no one in the other vehicle waved back. After the murder, Rick and Greg threatened to kill Jason if he said anything about seeing them in the car with Ed and Minnie. According to Jason, Rick and Greg drove by his house every day to threaten him. The trial began in October 2013. Michael told the jurors about his drive past the house at 5:30 a.m. and seeing his grandparents' light on. In his testimony, Michael said that he moved to Alaska for a job, but also spent 8 years attempting to find Rick and Greg, who he had believed killed his grandparents.
Rick's defense attorney pointed out there were no fingerprints or other DNA in the car, the house, or the wooded area matching Rick. Ed and Minnie's neighbor, Nona, testified that she saw a man looking in houses a day before the murder, on December 18th. 27 years after the event, Nona picked Rick out of a photo lineup as the man she had seen.
Les testified that he was friends with Rick and Greg in the mid-1980s. Les explained about a time he had told Rick and Greg that the Maurins probably had a lot of money when they drove by the house one day. On the day of the murders, Robin called Les and said, "You won't believe what Rick's done," but the call was interrupted by Rick as he hung up the phone before Robin could explain. 2 of Robin's children, now adults, took the stand to present evidence about Christmas 1985 and the time that Robin and Rick were married.
The prosecution's theory was that the Rife brothers had forced their way into Ed and Minnie's home in the early morning hours of December 19th, 1958. They forced Ed to call the bank to request the $8,500 withdrawal. The Rife brothers then got into the Chrysler with Ed and Minnie. They remained in the car but forced Ed to go in and withdraw the money. Then Ed was forced to drive to the country logging road.
Based on blood spatter in the car, they theorized when Ed and Minnie refused to get out of the car, Minnie was sitting in the front seat and was hit in the back of the head with the sawed-off shotgun. She was then shot from her back into her left shoulder, which killed her instantly. From behind, one of the brothers then rested the gun on the top of the bench seat and shot the back of Ed's neck, killing him. Ed's body from the driver's seat then slumped over onto Minnie's body, and Minnie slumped over onto the passenger front door. This would match the blood stains and spatter that was found inside the car. Ed and Minnie's bodies were pulled from the car and left on the side of the road, where they would be found 5 days later. Then one or both of the Rife brothers covered the front seat with a red blanket to prevent blood from soaking into their clothes, drove to Yardbird's parking lot, and abandoned the Maurins' car.
After a day and a half of deliberations, the jury returned a guilty sentence. Rick was found guilty with 2 counts of murder in the first degree, 2 counts of robbery in the first degree, 2 counts of kidnapping in the first degree, and 1 count of burglary in the first degree. That was 7 guilty sentences read out in court for the death of Ed and Minnie Maurin from 28 years previously. At a sentencing hearing in December 2013, Dennis and Hazel made statements about the tragedy. The siblings were now close in age to their mother when she had been murdered. Dennis was 86 and Hazel the exact same age at 83 years old. Dennis said,
"How could anyone be so cruel and act with such malice to shoot 2 elderly and trusting people in the back and dump them in the forest?"
And Hazel added,
"It's been very difficult for me to understand how someone could take away their lives for the money."
To think of them being the same age and then finally them getting justice, it just boggles my mind. It's terrible.
Yep, 28 years later, on something that could have been solved within 2 years if the right people had just come forward, because it turns out there were so many people being scared into silence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know it's easy for us to say, like, hey, if you had just come forward. In Jason's case, they're driving by his house daily, threatening him to hurt his family. Like, you can clearly see how these guys were kept busy threatening everybody into silence.
Mm-hmm.
But when they moved to Alaska, like any one person, this would have just been dominoes, kind of like now all these years later.
Mm-hmm. Rick Reif was ordered to pay $25,000 in restitution costs for trial expenses and his extradition costs from Alaska to Washington. He was sentenced to 103 years in prison for the events of December 19th, 1985.
Then in January 2014, Rick was ordered to pay an additional $8,500 for the money he had stole from Ed and Minnie. He was also ordered to pay $5,454 in costs for the funeral of Ed and Minnie. In September 2014, Rick was back in court after accepting a plea deal for a 1980s rape of a child family member. After accepting the plea deal, Rick would be sentenced for indecent liberties. The statute of limitation didn't apply to these charges because Rick had left the state of Washington. Only his time in the state had counted towards the statute of limitations, even though the rape had occurred 30 years previously.
Ed and Minnie Maurin are buried at St. Francis Xavier Cemetery in Lewis County, Washington.
We would love for you to become part of the Corrupt crew. You can find us on Patreon with multiple tiers and PayPal. This will score you our appreciation and will announce your name in a future episode. Both links are in the episode notes. Case suggestions and feedback can be emailed to us at corruptpod@gmail.com.
The sources for this episode would be listed in the episode notes. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Don't forget to subscribe to catch our new Corrupt content. Please also leave us a review wherever you're listening to this episode. Bye!
Bye!